All right, welcome back to another episode of the Clever Angle Podcast. This is episode 42, and I have Coach Marco Babic, and he's a local tennis coach in the community that I personally work with, and my brother works with as well. So, Marco, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks a lot, Tevin. I was very excited when we started talking about that you're doing podcasts, because I really enjoy this kind of stuff. Talking about certain things in life, how you end up there. How are me and you talking right now? It's just life is so interesting. It can take you so many different paths, and for me, it's definitely it's a blessing for me to be alive. Basically, where I grew up and how everything happened, and to be here and running two businesses now in United States. It's really, like I said, it's a blessing. So I appreciate you inviting me on.
No, absolutely. Have you ever been on a podcast before?
Yeah. I've been on a couple of podcasts, but nothing, too big or anything like that. I had some people that wanted to hear the story, where I come from.
Yeah.
And all that.
No, that's awesome. So yeah, I definitely want to dive directly into your origin story. So where did you grow up and where are you originally from?
So I grew up it was ex-Yugoslavia in the 90s. If you heard of it, we had major issues with hyperinflation, civil war going on, and we split in basically all the states became countries. We didn't have as many states as, for instance, United States, but it was still, I believe, 6 or 7, I forget, it's been now close to 25, 30 years since I left. And they all became countries. And it was Croatia where I grew up. It was on the coast of Croatia. If anybody on your channel, including yourself, if you remember, for instance, Bulls from the 90s, Tony Kukoc is from where I'm from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Dino Raja, he played the center for the Celtics at the same time Kukoc was playing. And then, a lot of basketball players that played in the NBA comes from that region of ex-Yugoslavia. Like, for instance, Dražen Petrovic, he played for the Nets. If you remember, he died in a car crash, unfortunately, somewhere in Germany. And there is a bunch of players that come from there. So a lot of people would know, especially in earlier days when Jordan still played. If you mention Tony Kukoc, everybody would know Croatia, because a lot of people wouldn't even know where Croatia is. So
yeah. Are you familiar with the basketball player Peja Stojakovic?
I forgot to mention him. Of course, he played for the Sacramento Kings. Yes.
Yeah. He was one of the guys that during the 2000s Lakers series, that when he played with Chris Webber and Vlade Divac and Mike Bibby and all them, that was a Kings team that I remember watching. And I think his son is in the basketball now, but he was an incredible 3-point shooter. And that's when I think of people that are, not from the United States, he's one of the people I think of first.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot Divac and him. Stojakovic was my son had his jersey with Kings somewhere out there. I got to find it to pass on for some couple of younger ones I got. But yeah, with Chris Webber, I remember Mike Bibby. You're right. Who else was on that team? That was a fun team.
Yeah. If it wasn't for Shaq and Kobe, they definitely would have got a championship. I think Doug Christie was on that team. It was Mike Bibby, Doug. Yeah.
Yep, I remember him. Yes, I followed a lot of sports. I'm one of those guys that I'm probably the only, I'm not going to say the only, but one of the few European guys, especially my age, coming in at like 18 when I showed up, that follows NFL and college football. Like I can break down plays, like, I just love the game. I love the competition of any sport. So I've been following sports. Basically, I've been in it myself, and I've been following it my whole life, from boxing to UFC. I mean, you name it. But I'm a really big fan of the 90s sports, though. I have not been following much of NBA. Like, I wouldn't even able to tell you last maybe 10 years who won so many championships. But if me and you start talking back like 90s or maybe even early 2000, I was really following a lot more. I thought the game was a lot more fun. Back then, it was more quality, I think. Overall tennis, I really think the 90s was the best competition when you look at Agassi, Sampras, and that's just, like I said, from my perspective, what I enjoyed watching. I love to watch Ali fight, even though there was a little bit definitely before me, but then going into Tyson, I remember in Europe as kids, because it's big time change. Whatever the time Tyson fought, It would be one guy in the town that would have the game, the fight on. And we would stay up. If it's like 4 a.m., we can be 12 years old. It did not matter. These old school Europeans would smoke cigarettes, and the whole room, I remember, would be filled with smoke and drinks, and everybody would watch Tyson fight, like, with Holyfield and all that. So I really, like I said, I'm a kind of a 90s sports junkie. That's me.
No, absolutely. And I definitely resonate with that a lot too, because I'm a Detroit Pistons fan. So obviously the 80s and 90s Pistons were a little bit before my time, but I've done extensive research on that time and how physical the games were, and back with when the Lakers in the late 80s and the Celtics. And then, obviously you had the Bulls in the 90s were pretty dominant in the 90s.
Yeah.
The Jazz was in there for a year, so, and then the Spurs were, kind of at the turn of the century. You had,
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you had Tim Duncan and David Robinson and all of them. So I've been a huge basketball fan even before tennis. NBA is something that I followed pretty much my whole life. And then I got into football, and then tennis is something that, a new love of mine. But it's interesting that you I resonate with you in a way when you said that you kind of just been a sports lover. And as I get older, I start to appreciate all types of competition.
Yes. Like I remember about 15 years ago, I would go and on the binge watch with, I think it was Steve Sable or something like that. It was the ESPN archives that would go into, as you know, I'm a Bears fan, which is hilarious. They're playing tomorrow, right? And because I grew up, which I'll tell my story in a little bit, how I ended up there and where I'm at now and what happened in between. But yeah, with the Lions and all of that back in the day with the Bears and all the competition, and looking in old school when Peyton was running back and the Bears obviously had that one Super Bowl, which was like, it seems 10,000 years ago. But we're so proud of that still from the 80s and talk about it every day. But man, I enjoy watching those old school games on that Steve Sable. I think that's how I pronounce his name. I think he passed, and that show hasn't been on for a while. But I love to watch like Pittsburgh Steelers against Ravens in the snow. Like I liked type of a 10-3 type of a game in the snow.
Yeah.
Like I loved like Ray Lewis's intensity on the field. Bears defense back in the day. I remember Matt Forte when I watched the game. I might have seen that one live because I lived in the city actually of Chicago. I can hear from Soldier Field where I live, like we would be a touchdown if I was not at the game. And when he would get popped by, let's say, Vikings were in town or the Packers or the Lions, and for the NFC North rivalry, and he would get popped, and I hear it in that cold, in January, right? And I said, how is he holding on to the football? Like, there is no way. Like, this guy would go 5 feet off the ground in the ice cold, turf, and he would land on his head, almost helmet, shoulder, and he gets up and just picks up another play and gets a first down. I mean, that's the kind of, I'm not saying that football is not tough now. Those guys are as tough as anyone. I just don't think it's not even comparable. And this is obviously up to debate. Some people may say, no, it's way, in my personal opinion, it's not even close. And they changed so many rules that I don't want to see people get hurt by any means, like concussion, broken neck. I'm not saying I want to see a guy hurt to make it entertaining, but their job is to hurt people. That's what their job is as a football player on defense. They're supposed to be not going to break your knee, but the harder they hit, the more chances of you dislodging the football or whatever it is to cause a fumble and recover it. If you give a guy a little lick on the neck, he's just going to look at you and score a touchdown every time. And I think the game has turned so much. But I don't want to digress from, to talk about football the whole time or NBA.
Yeah.
But it's overall, today's society, I think overall has changed so much over the past 20, 30 years. I think people in general became a lot softer in general. That's what I've noticed.
You're absolutely right. And, We could definitely have some good conversations about the NFC North. And I know that they just came out with a documentary about Barry Sanders, and I was watching that the other day and talking about the 90s Lions and how much buzz that was around the Lions at that point. And, football was something that I honestly didn't get really into until probably like the end of high school. Like I just never really was interested in the game. I was focused mostly on basketball and track. That's where my athletic background is in. So I was watching a lot of NBA. I was watching a lot of college basketball, and I was focusing on track. But it's like when I discovered football, I felt like I was missing out on something. For a good amount of time, and I felt that way with tennis. So being in Europe, being a European, when was your first introduction to like some of the more American sports like basketball and football?
Okay, well,
American football.
I was just going to get into that to tie it up with, well, yeah, there is a little construction here going on. I showed up basically to my friend's house that was not a friend at the time yet. It was the connection through the priest that ended up getting all my paperwork to leave War where I was living. So he said, oh, we're going to this family. They speak your language. They got 3 sons, right? They're all close to your age. Some of them are a little older. So I was pretty excited because I knew how to communicate. I can put sentences together in English, but I was not comfortable hanging out with, American people that were born here because I would not understand what they're saying. Like it would take me a while to connect all the dots, especially if there is slang, different type of dialect accent. I mean, from, down south, or I ended up working in a casino with a lot of people that I did not understand the word they say because of the way they pronounce things. So it was very hard for me. So I was very excited to meet these guys that would speak. They were born in the United States, but they were fluent in Croatian or Serbian, right? So when we showed up, we played some ping pong, which I play very competitively too. And they were really good. So I found that very entertaining. I was kind of in the machine right away because there is competition, because that's all I basically know how to do is compete. And I enjoy doing, that's what I meant to say. And we had a great time. And they said, oh, we got the Bears-Lions game, talking about Barry Sanders, right? And I said, what is that? Like, what are we going to watch? And they said, well, it's American football. And I was totally making jokes out of that. Like, it's basically soccer. Don't mess with soccer. If you're European, soccer, that's like it, There is no second thing to soccer when it comes to it. Like, what, rugby, football? No, it's soccer, right? So I got there and I had no idea what was going on. I did not know what the first down was. They had a cool setup back in the day, those old TVs, they were not flat screens. And I thought it was like the coolest thing I've seen. They had it on the ground with a bulky part in the back with some surround sound. And we're watching Lions-Bears game, right? And it was in Chicago at Soldier Field. And Sanders, of course, was the running back at the time. I forget where the QB was. I'll think of it in a second. This was 1996, I believe, right? And I said, why is everybody screaming? This guy just ran for 1 yard. And everybody's screaming like the game was won or something. But I did not understand. It was 4th and 1. And one of them, I forgot, was it the Bears or the Lions? They needed that 1 yard to basically ice the game to run the clock out now, right? Because it was a close game. And I asked them, what is the first down, second down? It took about 5 minutes. And I immediately fell in love with the game because I understood what it takes to hold on to the football versus giving it away, just a basic rule. And that's how I became, because they were all living in that area in Chicagoland, Indiana border. And everybody was either Notre Dame fan for college football or the Bears fan. There was some Colts fans in between because it was a border of Indiana. I don't know if you heard of Gary, Indiana. Michael Jackson was born there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I kind of lived in that area close to Gary. So it was about 45 minutes to actually downtown Chicago. And that's where I ended up moving from that Indiana, Illinois area back to, not back, but in the middle of the city. And that's when I was able to get to more games and all that and meet a lot more Bears fans because now I was right there. So that's how that whole thing happened. So it was basically religion for me. It was a big deal to watch NFL games, and college was a little bit later.
Oh, that's awesome. So we talked about how you got into that. When did you start? When did you start getting into tennis?
So tennis, I played soccer and I played basketball as a kid growing up in Europe, in Croatia. But my dad told me one day, and I'll never forget that. He said, "You're pretty good at basketball, but you're just not that good." And soccer is basically just not your thing, which I agreed on. So it was kind of like a cold hard fact because I was so competitive. All my buddies were playing soccer and basketball. So we were kind of trying to figure out which sport I would take on. And a war started to happen. We tried to like get outside, even though we were not supposed to. So there was like this old parking lot, and we set up some really ugly looking net, whatever we found. One of those, like if you ever seen those Idaho potatoes, the bags that hold. Yeah. So we had some of those we found in the trash, and we put like 2 posts on the old parking lot. And we had the sponge ball, kind of like a softball, and some plastic rackets that somebody had, and we started playing. So I was about 10, and I just honestly, as soon as I picked up that racket and started playing, I just fell in love with it. It did not take too long for me to say this is going to be the sport I want to do. But I understood the difference between I'm pretty good with that softball because you have a lot more time to set up for the shot. But then the war kind of slowed down a little bit at certain months, and we were looking for some tennis courts, and the coach, Dad, was trying to scramble, to find some money to pay for the lesson. And it was the red clay, kind of like when you watch French Open, red clay, not hard true. The one that's gray, it's more like, it looks like dirt. You know what I'm talking about, the actual red clay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
how old
go
were you
ahead.
how old were you when you finally found tennis?
It was between 10 and 12. So it sounds like that was pretty young, but for tennis to get at any kind of better level, like college type of tennis and stuff, 10, 12 is a little late. It's possible. I mean, you look at Yannick Sinner nowadays. I forget what other sport he played. He started tennis even right around that age when I'm talking about. So it's possible, but it's to get really up there, right? So yeah, it was between 10 and 12. And then I started doing lessons, and it was on clay courts. And like I said, I just developed passion. I think what really helped me was playing with that softball on that parking lot to read the ball, be able to set up, and then footwork from basketball. And soccer really helped for me to get there. I was not the fastest guy, but a lot faster than now, put it that way. Like it was easy for me to move around the court all day long. And tennis just became, that was it. So I started competing in the tournaments, but between the war going on and everything that we went through, it wasn't very steady. So it would be months that I would not even pick up a racket. So I won a couple of national tournaments and all that. I was playing a lot of singles. I was never really into doubles as much, but it was some doubles stuff. So tennis just started to be a thing. And this is where I can tie it into how it happened in the United States. What has happened, I had a chance to possibly, I'm not saying I would have if the war wasn't going on, to play at the really high college level, maybe pro, possibly. But I knew without training as much as I should, there was no way. So I kind of had a really bad taste in my mouth from tennis because all of that was kind of taken from me because of the war, the opportunity, whether it's just college or anything more than that, right? So when I came to United States, I was 18, and I have not played now for a couple of years. There is no way I can compete at the men's higher performance level, like a 5-0 or something.
Yeah.
At the way I really wanted to, because I was not training enough. That was. Mm-hmm.
So you started playing tennis at 12. When did you said it was kind of off and on between that because of the war. So you're telling me within a few years you were already winning tournaments?
Yeah. I believe tennis was so natural to me as maybe doing podcasts for you.
Yeah.
And a lot of other stuff I really can't. Like when it comes to fixing things, I'm probably the worst person ever. If you wanted me to fix your cabinet or something, that's why I always pay somebody else. That's why you hear something happening right now. Like there is a lot of things I'm just really not even interested in. But if I find interest in something, I kind of go all in. That's my personality. And it didn't take too long for tennis. It was not a really high level when the first one I won. It was kind of like, let's just call it intermediate level for your listeners, not to go into what was it, 3-0, 3-5, blah, blah, blah. It was more like intermediate level. And then 2 years after that, it didn't take too long. I just developed a really big serve, even on clay. That was it. A huge forehand and a big serve. And I was able to upset a lot of guys that were playing for years before me. They just did not have answers for it. And then I would sneak into the net on top of that, even on clay. I would just go in after a big forehand and I would finish the points a lot quicker. I basically played almost like a grass court tennis, which is, as you know, serve and volley type of fast surface on clay.
Yeah.
That was my plan, and it really worked for me. Like, I was able to outpower guys, outsmart them in a way, not going into their game of, grinders. They slide all day long. You watch these European guys slide on the clay court. They get everything back. You can't really beat them. You're playing 50 rallies, 1 point. They get to every short ball. Like, every time I see a guy that was like 5'6" and huge legs, I said, man, I'm in for a freaking brawl. I mean, this guy is a wall. He's going to get everything back. So I was like, no, you won't. So I was just coming in, and even though clay slows the ball down a lot, so I would lose a lot of points because of that in some matches, because even if you have a huge serve, it does take away a lot of that away from you, because the clay, as the ball hits it, loses a lot of amp of the ground. And they have enough time, unless you clip the line or something, and that just skids. But yeah, but again, big shots was my game plan, and I was able to keep up with those guys that played for years. That's kind of what I figured out, and I stuck with it.
Yeah. So I've got a question. So, like, obviously, you know a little bit about my tennis journey. When we went to sectionals for mixed state, we encountered a team from Georgia, and they were kind of perplexed that we were all playing on hard courts. So you apparently in Georgia, the main surface is clay. So what is the biggest difference between playing on clay courts, playing on hard courts, and then playing on grass courts?
So, like I was saying, is really the speed of the ball, right? You have more time on clay to set up for the shot, and you can construct points a lot better, because you have more time on, let's say, the courts that we play on for the most part in the United States is hard courts, just basically cement. You can call it what it is. The ball would skid a lot. It goes faster. So the points sometimes, a lot of times, finish a lot quicker. So the speed is a major difference. This is, for instance, if you look right now, what's going on in tennis since Pete Sampras retired and Agassi, so 2 American players, right? We have not had top 1 in United States in tennis for a long time. You're looking at Rafa, right, from Spain. You look at Djokovic, Serbian. You look at Federer, Switzerland, right? Then you look at, right now, Carlos Alcaraz, Spain.
Yeah.
Around. I mean, it's been a lot. And why is that? Because they know how to construct points. Okay. You got the flashy American players. What I mean by that, come in with huge serves, big forehands on hard courts. They can't win on clay. It's almost impossible because of the ball slows down a lot. So the other guys can actually return it. And once Spaniard or European returns the ball back into play on clay against American players, it's very hard for American player to win games, let alone sets or a match, because of the endurance and understanding that tennis is a chess game. You got to open up. You got to make a shot to open up for another play, like a chess game. You don't play your move as one move. You play it as 2 moves ahead. And European players, I believe, developed that, and I can vouch that from experience from playing on clay, because of the longer points and being able to understand, to dissect opponents slowly, make a move, short ball, angle, deep ball, versus, like I said, American style of tennis, which is kind of what I implemented without even being in America back in the day on clay court, because I knew that was the only chance I can possibly beat these guys at the national level, was just going big or go home. So that was, and if you get hot a little bit, yeah, you can have an upset. Like what's his name? John Isner, for instance. I'm sure you heard of him.
Yeah,
He
he's like
just
6'11", that guy.
yeah. He played
Yeah.
Georgia basketball. Huge serve. Like he got maybe third, fourth round French Open. I could be wrong on this one. He might have made quarterfinals once, and that's when he would get hot. Like everything would go in. He would paint the lines. Serve was just huge. Even on clay, the guys would not be able to return. Everything was going in, so he would end up winning. But for the most part, you don't see many big hitters. That's why Pete Sampras has never won French Open, because his serve was not a factor as much as it is at Wimbledon. So to break it down for you, to win a Grand Slam, meaning all of them, like few players did, like Agassi did, it is probably one of, I believe, the hardest accomplishments in sports. To win on clay, on grass, on hard courts in Australian Open, and then as well in US Open, which even though it's hard courts, but some of those surfaces, the way the courts are made, are faster or slower depending on how the court was made. So it is very hard to complete all four slams. And you can look up real quick if you want, if you have a setup in front of you, how many people actually won all four. It's almost, you can count in one hand.
Yeah,
It's very,
absolutely. Obviously, the big three probably have won all four slams. I know, Rafa is the king of clay, is what he's named, and he was one of the first people when I started to get into tennis that I followed, because he was a fellow left-handed player. So I did some research on him. So I'm glad he's getting to come back for at least one more year. I know he's been hurt this past year, but we'll get into a little bit of the conditioning of tennis, because I personally think Djokovic is going to be like undisputably the greatest tennis player of all time, just because of the longevity that he's being able to do, to still be able to compete at a high level at 35, 36 years old, which is tough. Tennis is a grinding body type of game, especially in singles. So just being able to watch him just in the short time that I've followed tennis has been amazing to see how he's still being able to compete with these 20, 21-year-old kids on any surface, pretty much.
Yeah. And you just touched up on those guys. That's what I was also going to lead into. As you look at, like you just said, the big three, it's not typical that you hear that the top three players in the world going back decades can win on all surfaces. You're looking at, like I said, you're going into like, well, Agassi did it, a couple other older guys back in the day. But now to look at Rafa, the way he was able to go from being, still is, of course, king of clay, to end up winning US Open, to end up winning Wimbledon, and working on his first serve. He knew he needed more power to win on hard courts and all that. It is beyond ridiculous on so many levels. And a lot of people don't understand that. They look at tennis as you just hit the ball back and forth. To set up on one of those shots, especially on hard courts, and the reason I say that, because it's hard on your ankles, on your bones. Any wrong movement, you're done. Okay, you tear your ACL, your MCL. I mean, it is so hard on the body, versus on clay, it's softer, right? And when you step and you put all your weight on that outside leg, when you load up to hit the shot, as a heavy ball comes in, let's say from, Djokovic's two-handed backhand, and it's flat 80 miles per hour. And for you to set up on a hard court to get so much leverage off the ground, to get that ball back at maybe 70 or 80 miles back per hour, it is beyond incredible what they're able to do. It is so hot.
Yeah.
It's grueling. That's what it is.
Yeah. And, I never really understood tennis as far as like as a game until I started playing. But then once you start playing, you start learning the basics of tennis. And then you watch Wimbledon and you watch some of the Grand Slams and some of these other tournaments, you realize how impressive it is to be able to do the things that they're doing. Now, they make it look effortless because they're professionals. And then, you go out there and it's hard to even hit with topspin, let alone doing some of the shots that they're able to hit. So getting back on track to kind of what you were talking about, you're 18 years old and you're in America, you had a bad taste in your mouth. And you were going to go into a story before we got off on tennis?
Yes. Yes. So I did not play. I did not play for several years. And, when you're 18 and you did not go to school much at all, we basically lived in the basement, outside, inside. It was just
Yeah.
crazy, right? There was nothing normal. Everything was not normal, right? So you come out here to United States. Yeah, I can't just go to college because I'm not ready. English was, like I said, okay, I can understand a lot of stuff, I can communicate, but I'm not, my academics overall was nowhere close to keep up anyone like they're about to graduate high school and go to college. Like I didn't have, so what do I do, right? So tennis was, like I said, I'm not going to say I hated tennis, but it really left bad taste in my mouth. I thought I had a chance to have a really different life, and it wasn't meant to be. It just didn't happen. So I just put that on the back burner completely. Tennis is done. I'm not even competing. I'm not doing anything with it. So I decided, I said, you know what? I'm just going to get my GED to get some kind of, so I feel like I'm doing something from that mess to kind of fit in normally. Like I got a diploma, at least that, right? I accomplished something, right? Which is kind of funny for GED. Even that was hard for me because the learning concept of things and to have discipline was not engraved in my head because of the lifestyle we had. I was basically a total loose cannon. It was kind of like a caged animal when you let out of the basement at that age. You can only imagine, how that would be, chasing women all day long, whatever. Hopefully my wife is not listening. Whatever I was doing, it was not, I had no discipline. So I said, I'm going to get that done. So what I did is I decided to join U.S. military because I had all the paperwork, green card and all that. And I decided to go in. And then when I got there, I was so immature. That was not even going to work for me. Basically, I was not mentally ready for it. And I was supposed to be also sent back in that mess to be like translating. I'm like, what? So I was able to get out. And then I ended up going into, I said, maybe I turned 18. Well, I need to find a job now. So military was done. It didn't last too long, but I served a little bit. I was in, didn't learn much discipline. I was, like I said, a loose cannon, getting in trouble with racing, all kinds of stupid stuff that you can name. That's where I was, right? Just not leading into the right direction at all. So it took a little bit. I said, I need to find a job to keep me away from getting in trouble, right? So I got into casino business, right? I started working in Gary, Indiana. That was a Trump casino, believe it or not. That was a little boat, like a ship that would take from Gary, and you can kind of see the skyline of Chicago, right? And it was another one next to him was Majestic Star, I believe it was called. So there was a Trump casino, which was the ship, and a Majestic Star, which was a different owner of the other one. It was both casinos, right? And I ended up working there as a security guard. Ended up working as a security supervisor for USA pageant that was happening in Gary, which was a lot of fun for me back when you're 19, 20 years old now, in that range, 18 to 20. So I did that, and I really enjoyed being in the casino and the action and all that. So I started working as a dealer. I went to school to become a dealer, to deal all the games, right? So I was doing all that, and where the story comes, I dealt to Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen. I was in the high limit room. They would come in with their yacht. They would dock at in Gary, Indiana, and they would go in. And I thought I was a pretty good dealer, so they would put me inside the high limits where you would make less mistakes with high end clients like that. And that was kind of like really cool at the time. I was really enjoying that, right? Dealing to Michael Jordan. He would come in more often than people realize. I don't know if all the true stories, how media is, it's hard to believe anyone. He had these issues with gambling and all that. I don't know if that's true or not, but he was playing a lot with Scottie Pippen in Gary, Indiana. So to connect this with tennis, which I think it's just kind of wild. It's hard to believe some of these stories. I was dealing. One day was slow, just a regular $25 blackjack game. And it was this guy that would always come in with like a tennis outfit, right? And I know tennis outfit versus just Nike outfit. I know
Yeah,
exactly what I know, right? So we kind of became a little bit of friends, even though I was taking his money as a dealer for the
Yeah.
most part. And he would always want to make sure that I deal to him. And his name was John B. We're still friends today. And I asked him, I said, "You play tennis?" He's like, "Oh yeah. I compete, but I also have a business with my dad, like 20 minutes from here it's called Briar Ridge Country Club, close to Gary, Indiana. It's Munster, Indiana." And he says, "I'm there." I said, "Oh, I played a long time." And you can kind of see where this was going.
Yeah.
We ended up getting together on a tennis court. We ended up going to Hilton Head Island just because we knew each other just from me being the dealer. And he says, "Well, if you want to get certified ever, if you're willing to put in some hours, me and my dad have this whole camp going." And so now I'm around maybe 20 years old at the time. I
And you
can't
still haven't
exactly.
played. You haven't played in a few
No,
years.
I did not pick up a racket. So me and him go to Hilton Head Island, and he was on a hard true. And he's been playing on hard courts the whole time. He's left-handed like yourself.
Yeah.
Very fast, kind of annoying player. Gets everything back, right? And we started playing a little bit, and I started to feel my rhythm a little bit. And we got into a match. And I don't want to tell the details just in case if he hears this podcast too much. But let's just say I was getting killed because I didn't even realize that he was left-handed. I kept hitting to his forehand thinking it's a backhand. That's how my mind was so out of tennis. And he would just smoke me. I would come up to the net and all that. And I was able to adjust. And like I said, I don't want to go into details what happened later, but I kind of woke up. Like there was a wake-up call for me that I developed passion for the game with my friend John B from Chicago area, right? And all of a sudden I said, "No, I'm going to start coaching." I got my certification at Hilton Head. He had some really good clients that would hook us up with a house there when we would be there. Cause it's not like I had money to do any of this. I spent it all on, stupid stuff as a young guy. And I got my certification and started working with him. And I was doing 10, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, like every day. And I just started coaching. And then I did a lot of leagues in between down the road. I started competing at the 5-0 level a lot, but it was so hard for my body as my now age is not 20 anymore. We're looking at 27 or 30, and you're teaching 8 hours a day. And I would play at the 5-0 singles and doubles, and I would not be able to teach that many hours because, you have like these annoying pains in your back or shoulder starts hurting. And, forearm, I had some issues with my right forearm and kind of like a tennis elbow type of a deal. And I just stopped competing. I just really focused on coaching because I enjoyed it and the money was good. So it was just a no-brainer. And I was right back into what I loved and had that bad taste in my mouth that I just almost like hated. And I developed it through
Yeah,
that.
so that's so interesting because now that I'm trying to follow your journey a little bit, it's kind of crazy when you mentioned that it just kind of came natural to you, but to be able to take some years off and then come back to competing at the 5-0 level, that just kind of blows my mind of how you're able to do that. So that's a crazy story. So
It
that
is. And yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because I kept with the same strategy. Big serve, big forehand, come to the net. And if my timing would be a little off, I would get killed 6-1, 6-0 sometimes. But if I'm a little bit on, the next time I play the same guy, I win 6-1, 6-1. It's over. They would not see the ball. So again, yes, I took a lot of time off, but I did not need to be in that great of a shape, nor that I ever really was. I mean, sometimes I would play a men's tournament with the same guy. He was definitely not a party animal like I am, but I would go Las Vegas tournament, men's open, which means you can play guys that are maybe 4-0. You can play guys that played on tour because it would be 25,000 championship or something like that, right? I played the guys that actually competed on tour, and I played the guys that I knew I can win. And I would come in from staying up till 5 a.m. the day before, and the match would be at 8 or 9 a.m. in Las Vegas. And I would literally go off the poker table after partying all night and go play tennis. I mean, that's the kind of I was always
Yeah.
like back in the day. Like it was no no filter, no discipline.
Yeah. But I mean, so after like a night like that, going to play tennis, did your performance suffer, or were you still able to use the same strategy, and were you winning some matches during
Same
that time?
strategy. I would mix it up a little bit. Like for instance, I would hit the second serve as big as first serve too sometimes, because I did not want the points to even last two hits, because I would not be. I just wasn't ready to run around that much, and I would still finish the game. And I got a lot of wins because of that. Because of I was just not afraid to go big or go home. So that was just kind of in a way a crazy excuse. Well, I really don't feel that great. I don't want to run around all day. So I applied this method and somehow it works, and pulling off upsets. I lost a lot too, by the way, because of
See,
that. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong.
that's interesting, because it kind of goes into the, you're around gambling, and it just allowed you to take more risk on the court and not, fear of if it was going to work out or not. Because at the recreational level that I'm playing right now, I'm playing a lot of 3-0, some 3-5. It, especially like on the second serve or like the second set, or if people get down, I see a lot of people kind of pull back and they want to play safer, which, it doesn't really work out that well. And, I'm listening to your story and you're like, no, I just took risk and it either worked out for me or you didn't. So that's interesting that, that kind of translated to your tennis game from doing
Yeah.
high stakes poker and blackjack and stuff all the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's just my personality. But at the same time, I've been in situations in the tennis match where I would get tight. Okay. Like, we're all human. And I'm just going to tell, if any of your listeners, I'm sure they are playing or trying to play, when you get like that, when you get tight and your racket starts to decelerate on contact versus accelerate, when you start being scared, when you start getting scared, when you get tight, nothing works. You got to just let the racket accelerate and just go with it. Obviously, if the technique is not there, if someone is a beginner, nothing is going to work. But if you had days where you can hit the ball with more pace, let's say the intermediate level, like a 3-5-ish in that range, 3-0, 3-5 for men, you just got to hit the ball. You cannot decelerate, because then everything goes long. It's just a push and you can't play and you become mentally weak. Okay. You're going to lose. And that's the feeling that I've had so many times. And I had to battle those demons to just hit the ball and not be afraid if it goes into the net or out a little bit, because slowly I would find that rhythm. And all of a sudden, the guy that for sure thought he had it, he won the first set 6-2. All of a sudden, we are in a tiebreaker and I have a chance to win just because I actually let loose. And I'm not saying now, people being crazy and hit the ball 1,000 miles per hour every time, especially if the technique is not there yet. You got to have some kind of fundamentals already put in place that you can hit a little bit more through the ball and just relax. And that's why I also like to serve and volley, because it would get you to move and not overthink stuff. You see what I mean? Even in singles, when you hit a serve and your body movement is already forward as the ball is coming at you, you don't have time to think, man, I'm going to lose this match, or I suck, I'm terrible. The world is against me. All this nonsense that goes through players' minds. I don't care who you are. You have that as a tennis player, because it's a very lonely individual sport, unless, of course, you play doubles. But then sometimes it's even worse because you don't want to disappoint your partner. It's even more stress, I think, when you're on your own. It's you. So I kind of embraced that, and it shaped me up to be more like a risk taker in a way that makes sense for everything I do in life. That there is no fear, if that makes sense. And
No,
yes, it does.
yeah. What'd you say? Go ahead.
No, and then no, that was it. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you're coaching, you're about 27 years old, you're playing at the 5-0 level. You mentioned earlier that you were mostly singles. When did you start coaching doubles and double strategy? Because now, especially that I'm playing a lot, doubles is pretty much the premier designation in rec league. Like, you play more doubles courts. There's a lot of leagues that are just doubles. And then singles is kind of like a It's kind of backwards. Like rec play is more doubles, and then pro play is like singles focused, and doubles is kind of on the back burner. When did you start focusing on learning and teaching doubles, or have you always taught doubles?
So there was a gentleman in in Las Vegas. His name is John McCauley. He is, if you ever end up in Las Vegas, if you're doing anything with tennis, you have to book a lesson with John McCauley. He is Las Vegas legend. Okay. This is the guy that I ended up in between. That's why I told you pre-meeting, there were so many things that happened for me to be where I'm at right now. It's kind of hard to connect dots, but there was in between Chicago and where I'm at right now. There was a stop in Las Vegas for about 8 years where I lived, and I did coach in a really big tennis facility called Darling Tennis Center. And that's where I met John as one of the head pros. And his thing is all about backspin, volleys. And this guy is, I don't know how old he is right now. He might be pushing maybe upper 50s, very fast at the net, a lot of spin. He was a pitcher in baseball, so very hard to return his serve. I was like, man, I'm watching him against D1 college kids on a stadium court. Darling Tennis Center, by the way, has a stadium court where Agassi trains with Steffi Graf. I mean, it's a beautiful facility. It's got 23 courts, 2 of them in the back, if anybody can remember. Court 22, if you book, you can see the lights of the strip if you do like a little later lesson or hitting. It's a pretty cool place. And stadium court was there. And I watched John play some of these UCLA, USC, West Coast, really good D1 school, of course. And he would win with his partner. Like he would win. I said, how is a 50-year-old guy beating these monster-looking kids, like in shape? I mean, the guy would wipe off his sweat and he's got like 12 pack going on. I'm talking like these kids are like pure athletes, like basketball player type of, almost like a wide receiver type of a body, NFL, college. You know what I'm talking about? Very strong,
Absolutely,
but not
yeah,
like,
yeah.
like just amazing athletes. And this guy was winning. So I started taking notes, okay, from him. I started watching how he's coaching, let's say, women's 3-0s. How is he coaching men's 5-0s? I started to really get interested because I was all about singles. Doubles was never my passion, right? And that really it started to make sense. It just clicked, the stuff that he was saying. Then I did a lot of other research. Then I did a lot of different, I guess you can call it workshops, symposiums for tennis. And a lot of them, I was like, okay, this was really good, but nothing that I really, not to brag about it, didn't know, or it didn't resonate with me as much. But man, there was a couple other guys that I put pieces together now from my own kind of experience, common sense. Then you got John McCauley on this side. Then I got this guy that just did this. And it just clicked. It just made sense. I said, I have now a blueprint to coach doubles at the high level, intermediate level, beginner level, and for people to actually win for the rest of my life. And it's not like you can hear this stuff anywhere you go. There is only a selective few that really can coach doubles and understand the strategy and what drills to do that makes sense for the level that you're coaching. Because you can't teach the same way, which a lot of coaches are doing, which took me a while to learn, but I'm understanding it. I was like, this is not making sense. Why am I doing this drill with the ladies till 5? So I broke it down and I put, like I said, a lot of notes. And I developed passion for it because it made sense and I've seen it work. Like, for instance, I've had a team that went from Las Vegas. They could not win one team win. They were getting destroyed to end up the next year going undefeated in their 2-5 and moving to 3-0 from 0-12 to 12-0. Because they had some pretty good players, but they had no clue how to play doubles, where to be and all that. And that was kind of fun for me to watch. Then it happened again. Maybe this team, I forget, they had 2 wins, 90% losses, undefeated. Third one, undefeated, just using the same method, or making state, losing some, but making state constantly and winning, and then losing at the national level, close ones or a couple of wins from Las Vegas. That was all coming in from just developing passion for doubles. I like to play it, but I prefer playing singles. But when it comes to clinics, coaching, I love doubles because there is so much that makes sense to me that I can offer to people. And it took a lot of years for me to put this together and a lot of trials and errors. If I would have known what I know now when I played with John B., when we played our tournaments, whether or not I was out till 5 a.m, I don't know how many tournaments we would have won or made it to the semis or finals and made more money on those hustle tournaments on the side if I would have known what I found out years later. I couldn't believe how dumb it was that I didn't even see that.
Yeah. And coming from a singles player like yourself that already had the serve and volley technique down, because obviously volleys is a big part of doubles. So you've got this doubles blueprint now. So you're coaching doubles. How did you get from, the Chicago area, the Indiana area, Vegas? How did you make your way to Arkansas?
Man, you got some good questions. I'll tell you, I was hoping you asked because, like I said, I can rant for days and people will be like, what did he just say? Like this, he was here and then connect the dots. Like I said, it's not easy. So basically, I'll put this one in about 2 to 5 minutes at the most. My wife got her MBA in Las Vegas, right? Executive MBA. She graduated. She got a job offer in Florida, which was on the Gulf Coast. So there is Florida in between these two. And this was in 2019, early 2019. And this was like a no-brainer job offer. It was on the Gulf Coast, right on the beach. This is the place we used to vacation. We loved it, right? And all of a sudden, this new gig that she was getting, which was an offer you can't refuse, was right there. It was like a miracle, right? So I ended up leaving Las Vegas tennis place that I was at, where I had a lot of clients, build up a pretty good name out there, and coaching for, again, I'm not very good exact time, but let's say between 7-8 years on and off. I left because of her position. I figured, well, it's Florida. Everybody plays tennis. Maybe I'll do it at some time. But, like I said, her job was going to be a lot more money than I was making at the time. So it was just, let's just go and see what happens, right? And then all this COVID madness happened while we were in Florida. And the two offices that she was running, over 220 employees, everybody was laid off, including herself in early. And I'm out there with kids. And the place that I was at was on the beach. I mean, it was not easy to keep up with those payments, even with a little bit of cushion for savings for several months and all that. So I got stuck there. I left my position, and that whole thing with COVID happened. I'm like, now what? What do I do? For me, that was just another way of, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not going to say I enjoyed it. I embraced it, but I'm so used to making, I guess, crazy big decisions that I kind of liked it, that it happened. Because I looked at it as an opportunity for something different now. But what would that be? Like, where do I go? Where do I go? Nobody has a job now. We sold a house in Vegas. I got kids, little kids. Where do I go? So I told her, I said, you got 24 hours to find a place anywhere on the map that has land. I want land. Because I thought that this whole COVID thing, what happened was, and I know this is a subject that nobody wants to talk about. In my opinion, based on what I lived, what I've seen back in Europe, I thought it was going to be a complete government overreach. They're going to step in and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was not wrong. Whether or not what people think, what they should have or not done, I'm just saying I knew it was going to be bad, whatever they end up getting involved with. And they said there is no, every single government's a temporary program ends up being permanent. So I kind of felt like this is going to be a lot longer than let's just shut down, because Florida was shut down. A lot of people don't know. And I said, I just want to get out of here and kind of like start somewhere. Maybe we can find something cheap. I said, you got those 2 pay stubs? She's looking at me like, what? I said, show me your last pay stub. I want to see the date, because they're going to ask you if I find a house to show me the last checks for income, right? Because how are you going to get, we had a great credit, the highest one, but if you got no jobs, who's going to give you credit, right? And this is in the middle of all that madness happening, as you can imagine. Go back to 20, right? So she shows me this place it was Texas, not much pasture land, because she always wanted to have a horse, right, down the road. Not that we were in position to be already searching to buy a horse, but I was just looking, hey, I want some pasture land. I want some land. Let's look into some places where Texas kind of like prices were still kind of steep. I was like, I don't know. Maybe not. It was a lot of not pasture land, but pretty good size property, way cheaper than what we were paying in Florida or Las Vegas, right? It still looked like I can make this happen, make this work no matter what. We can always find some jobs here and there, some basic jobs, and make it work. But Texas fell off the map, did not work. So we started looking a little bit more. She shows me the one. It was actually Wyoming. It was the one that was like 20 acres, but it was no pasture land, right? And I said, no. She said, too cold. If I got animals down the road or something like horse, how am I going to deal with it? I said, no, forget it. So I'm thinking, yeah, this is not going to work. I don't know what to do. And all of a sudden, I said, if you don't find, I'm buying an RV. And she says, what? I said, I'm buying an RV. I'm not paying $5,000 a month to be here on the beach. I said, I'm buying an RV, and then wherever I end up, I know I can find a tennis coaching business somewhere and get started. And then I can sell it later. I just said, I need something I'm not going to pay $5,000 a month here. I'm done. This place was not meant to be. I'm done with Florida. Out, right? So once she heard the RV and she knew I was serious, she really got digging to find a place now, right? And here comes this land behind me on the map, Sulphur Rock, Arkansas. Never been to Arkansas in my life, by the way, ever. Okay, I'm as the more city guy that you can probably ever find. And I said, well, what is that? I said, I get how many, 40 acres and a house for what? I said, there is no way. It's got to be a joke, right? So I called them up. They actually answered because, it was in the middle of COVID. So everybody was freaking out and nobody was buying anything. And I put a lowball offer thinking there is no way this is going to stick, right? And the lady calls me back the next day or a few hours later, I forget. And she said, well, if you can send me your bank statements and last 2 stubs of your paycheck, which I had ready already. I said, okay, we send it out. She goes, offer accepted. I said, can you give me 24 hours if I can physically see the place? Because you know how it is when you see it on the pictures. It can be like, She said, no problem, but you have 24 hours. So it was basically just, again, another blessing, a miracle. We took the kids the next day I got family, in-laws live in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That's why if you see videos from Alabama game, I kind of got lucky to at least have one football team that's actually winning. So we go to Tuscaloosa, drop the kids. The next morning, we spend the night there. I took her alone the next morning, and I got to this place, Sulphur Rock, Arkansas. And it was, some trailer parks going through as it was getting closer. I'm like, oh, this is not going to work. It's probably going to be bad. And all of a sudden, there is like a kind of a cool road with a lot of trees on the side, kind of like a windy road. And there is this land in front of me. I mean, I was just, the house was built in the mid-90s, turnkey ready, nothing to it. Right now, we're remodeling certain things the way we like it, but it was turnkey ready. Nothing, like I said, to do it, but it had a house. It's like this for the price that we paid was 4 times less than what we used to own with 40 more acres. I mean, I understand it's Arkansas, not Las Vegas, but I'm like, that's a no-brainer, right? So I called the lady I didn't call her. She was right here. I love the place. I said, we're good. Where do I sign? That was it. Came back, got the U-Haul truck, and I moved. It took about 6 months to get things rolling. We did not have any jobs, and she found a little bit of some little work online, working from home, and I didn't have anything with tennis. I didn't even think people play tennis in Arkansas.
Yes. It's interesting because, you said you had never come to Arkansas, and honestly, not really knowing your backstory, I didn't I didn't know anything about the tennis community before I started playing, but the way that you were received in Jonesboro, I just assumed you'd been here for a long time. Now I hear your story and you're like, no, I've only been here about 3 years. So that was new to me hearing that. So that's interesting. But a lot of people that have never been to Arkansas just have this perception that it's, we walk around barefoot, there's nothing there, there's nothing to do. Why would you ever want to live in Arkansas? And then you come and then you see all the beauty and all the hiking trails and things that you can do, and people are like, oh, this would be a nice place to be. So it's funny seeing how you've never really been a country guy and now you end up on 40 acres in Arkansas.
Yeah, I just really like right now. I would have to say, never say never, but I am in love with the state of Arkansas. Like I met so many great people like yourself, your brother, and so many other people in Jonesboro through Pat Malone, which I'll touch up in a second with how that whole meetup happened with everything that how I actually started coaching here. I'll close off with that on the whole path of how I ended up here, because now it just kind of ties down to how I ended up where I ended up, right? And it's just it's been awesome to meet all those people. And yeah, it's only been 3 years. So I went to community center in Batesville, which is the closest bigger town where I live, about 15 minutes from Sulphur Rock. So very close. Batesville's got about 10,000 people, nothing big, but nonetheless way bigger than the little town that we're in with 400 people, right? And I got there and I wanted to do something with tennis at the community center because they got two courts. They're pretty bad. They're beat up, but they got two courts, and I tried a little bit of something and I just really never took off. And then the director of the community center, Jeff, he said, I got this guy, Pat Malone, you can give him a call. He's doing some stuff here with tennis and he knows a lot of people. You need to probably give him a call. That's up to you. I know you probably want to do your own thing, but to get started, it would be really good to reach out to him. And I did. And Pat immediately, when he saw my resume, invited me to Jonesboro. We met in the office and I started just helping out with some camps and all that. And then about a year and a half, 2 years after, about a year and a half, Pat was already mentioning he's trying to go somewhere else. I had a lot of people that started working with me and he had no issues with me out there or the city that I'm aware of. And he says, you can just take over because I have other plans and all that. So Pat is the one that introduced me to all those people. And he ended up leaving. And I took over the contract, basically, still working on some stuff with the contract with Earl Bell in Jonesboro. And Pat decided to go on with next endeavors. I've seen on your channel, you interviewed him. He's obviously a very energetic guy, probably very interesting story too, like mine, with his Marine background and how intense he is and all that. It was just incredible to how that worked out on accident again with him and where we are today.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, I interviewed Pat, and that was kind of when I just started getting into my tennis journey. And it's just a great way to be able to meet people and connect with people. So that's a really interesting story about how you get all the way from Europe to Vegas to Chicago, Indiana, some Alabama in there, and then, make your way down to the natural state. So
yeah.
So what are three things, Marco, that you would pieces of advice that you would give to someone that's never played tennis but wants to?
Well, number one, there is so many things that I can add on this, but I'll try to stick with three. Go in with open mind when you're playing tennis, meaning don't expect immediately to play at pro level. Understand that you got to learn to deal with adversity because it is, as you know, a very mental, grueling sport, not just physical, but physical part comes a little later as you get better because you got to set up more on the tougher balls that are coming. So be open-minded to be ready to deal with adversity. And this will help you with everything else you do in life. Number two, do not jump in to leagues immediately if you do not already have passion for the game, or even if you do, take your time. Why am I saying this? Which a lot of tennis clubs will probably say, well, this guy is crazy because that's what brings the most money for the tennis clubs and all that, because people are more, kind of like not stuck, but they are very connected with the club if that happens. It's because of a lot of bad sportsmanship out there, and they can make you not love the game. So don't rush into leagues right away. Learn how to keep track of the score and all that, what the league is all about. But I don't want you to go in and start hating it because of some idiot that's calling every ball out and making fun of you the way you hit the ball, or whatever the reason you may be. I'm sure you have a lot of experiences from that. It can be a little rough if you have a bad captain, that there is no camaraderie in the team. So going open-minded, knowing you're going to have to deal with some adversity. Do not jump into leagues too quickly. And number 3, just be ready to work. Go in knowing that when you develop passion for tennis, it is going to be nonstop in your head, because certain shots you could have done better. And that's what's going to keep you driving with everything else you do in life, whether it's business, whether it's relationship. It's going to make you, it's a mindset that you shape through tennis. And they say, there is a saying, if you want to learn something about someone, like their character, put them in the game of tennis for 10 minutes or golf, and you'll learn everything you have to learn about this person, okay, to actual game. Because you know who is a cheater, you know who is very good dealing with adversity. When you're losing, can you come back? Who is a fighter, who is not, who is very competitive, that's what I mean. And that's what comes down from picking up that golf club and going on the course or in the tennis game.
Yeah, absolutely. That's some good pieces of advice, and those are things that I've been kind of racking my brain about. So I wanted to ask you this. I asked Pat when I interviewed him, why do you think that there is such a great imbalance for the number of women players versus men players at the beginner levels? And what are some things that we can do to get more beginner guys in? Because right now, looking ahead to spring league, it doesn't even look like there's going to be a 2-5 men's division at all. And one thing that I've been just kind of thinking about is how can we get more guys in the sport to kind of grow it in the area?
Well, the way I've noticed it with men, it comes down to men want to be next Rafael Nadal tomorrow. Okay, they come in out there, especially if you're an athlete, you played basketball like yourself, like your brother, you guys are really in great shape. You got a lot of guys that I've seen on the tennis courts that would lift weights or be in really good shape, or like I said, they play. I had a couple of guys that they were running backs in college football, okay? They can get to every ball. They can't deal with the fact that they cannot really play well for a while, because it's so much technique involved to learn. So what they want is men leave the sport. They do not want to play because they want to be next Nadal overnight. They come in with that mindset. They want to hit the ball as hard as they can, especially in doubles. They're going to, on the return of serve, they're going to hit as hard as they can right away to try to beat the guy at the net down the line, playing the lowest percentage shot every single time. I'm going to repeat that again, playing the lowest percentage shot every single shot and trying to win when the level is not there yet. While women, what I've noticed, are more like, listen, I'm getting a great workout. I'm getting competitive, even though maybe I didn't even play sports before. And this is all of a sudden like I'm able to, wow, this is pretty good. They got all their Apple Watches. Look how many steps they did. Okay, well, I lost, but they find it in a completely different way as what I've noticed men do. That's why, including in Las Vegas, where you have tennis club after tennis club, and I was in a huge facility, it was more women playing. And guys would come and go, and they would just, well, I don't like this coach. I don't like the way he feeds the ball. I like this. I like this drill better. I don't like that drill. Well, I want to go with this guy. I mean, it's constantly, a battle there that eventually leads to, I'm just going to do my own thing or not even play on a league. And I'm just going to play some open tournaments and call it a day. That's what I've noticed from 25 something years now of experience in the tennis community. You can call it tennis community.
That's interesting. So I do want to double back on your time in Arkansas. So, you moved here about 3 years ago. You mentioned your wife having aspirations on getting a horse one day. Do you have animals on your farm, or like what is your plan, and what are you doing with your land right now?
Well, when we got here, we have a lot of hunting property in the back and on the sides. We mean like, woods basically, but there is about 10 to 12 acres that's like pasture land. So we were able to, when the first job came along, just a basic little job online, we're like, okay, we're going to get that horse now because we have so much grass instead of mowing it. Let's just get that horse out there and get started. And it was a pretty cheap horse. She was unfortunately not well taken care of. And man, we got that horse up to go pretty quickly. I mean, she's just she's huge. I mean, the muscles are just stacked on. It's like watching Shannon Sharp, every single muscle is kind of like you took it and you put it right there. That looks good. No, this one looks better. It is just a gorgeous animal now, right? So when that happened, I wanted to have our own food. And I was really not sure how to do that with the whole thing with the cattle because I have no experience. So this is probably hilarious story, I think. So that was, what do I do? So we're looking on Facebook, like, how do I buy a cow? I don't know,
Yeah.
So we got this little electric fence, I think I can put out. We had no fencing either. It was just kind of open, with a little bit from the neighbor, some barbed wire, but that's about it. And this guy from Scranton, Arkansas, I did not understand a word this guy was saying, right?
Yeah.
And I know he didn't understand me. So you got this, we call it what it is, this hillbilly guy, old man, trying to talk to European guy in Arkansas to buy some cows. I mean, it was just hysterical to try to talk to him. But somehow we got to understand each other that I needed 2 cows, right? He says, okay, well, I got the driver. We agreed on the price. We're out there putting the electric fence around. I said, okay, well, I'll get started with that and see where he goes. I just want to make sure I have food for my own family and to use that land for something, right? And again, going back to the whole COVID thing, I thought that the lockdowns would last a lot longer. The shortages of food with a lot of wars globally, as I'm sure you're aware of, with the supply chain issues. And I already went through all that mess. And I was like, just to make sure with little kids, I want to have my own food. I just don't trust anyone in government, by the way. There is not one person in the office that I trust. Left, right, black, white, I don't give a shit. I don't trust any of them. Okay. I just do not to put that out there. So I said, I want to have my own food because I don't trust people in charge to do anything right. And that's kind of how it happened. So he got me 9 cows that I can pick 2 out of the 9 that I like. I'm like, man, what a guy. This is great. So this old man comes in. He's probably 90. I'm not over exaggerating. And he's got, of course, his 2500 pickup truck, and he's got a trailer full of cows. I'm like, okay, I want number 22 and 23. I was thinking I want to get the cow that doesn't have eyes like this or snotty nose or something. I want to look the one that looks kind of, that's all I know, right? And they were all young, maybe 6 to 8 months. So heifers. And I tell the driver, he says, he goes, well, go get him. I said, go get him what? How am I going to get him? Right? And I had one of the guys here, veterans, that worked on the fence to help out with electric fence. And he played football, at a really high level, offensive line, so really strong Arkansas man, right? And he's out there. Well, we can just grab him by the tail and pull him out. I said, what? I thought he was joking, right? So he goes in there and, and this guy is, like I said, he's a bull, man. And he goes in there and he tries to grab that tail a little bit. And man, those cows just stick their head, herd mentality inside. So,
yeah.
they don't want to come out. So I come up to the driver and I said, listen, man, I can't get the 2 I want. I don't know what you want me to do. You got to help me out. He says, there's nothing I can do. I'm 90 years old. He says, you can call whatever the guys in Scranton and figure it out. So I called him up and he says, well, yeah, the man is very old. If you can't get him out, I don't know what to tell you. I said, oh, you want me to buy all 9? That's where the game is. Like, I don't know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
I said, well, I guess I'll buy all 9 since you drove all the way from basically close to Fayetteville. I said, I'll buy all 9, but this is what I'll pay you for. And he did agree. It took a while for him to agree, but because then we just hit from one side of the trailer and they all came out together. And then I kind of looked around and I said, now what? Now I got 9 cows. I wanted 2. And it turned into a farm to table nationwide beef business because I had so many cows that a lot of family friends, when they found out, they started buying from us because they would come over, they would have steaks here or whatever, hamburgers. They're like, man, this is the most delicious meat I've ever had. So they started ordering like 50 pounds, 100-pound orders. Then I started just, they're telling their friends, then their friends telling other friends. All of a sudden, those were sold within no time. I ended up selling like in 2 years over 40 head of cattle in just a matter of 2 years. And now has turned into like I said, a nationwide farm to table business. And that's how the story happened. It was but the thing is, I developed passion for it. You see, like that was one of those deals that I
you're
immediately
interested in
started.
it.
I was really interested. That's why I was like, no, I love the fact to see the cow up front and they just graze, or the horse. I just think it's beautiful and they take care of themselves. You just got to make sure you got a good fence. There are some issues, you got to get them sometimes and all that. It gets really cold, maybe 2 weeks out of the winter in here in Sulphur Rock. So I got to, break the water. So it's not like you have dogs, right? Which I always, not always, but I had a dog too. That they're more like, they're like your kid. While these animals like this are, especially cattle or chickens, which we have chickens too, they're out there doing their own thing. Like you don't even have to look. You just got to make sure they got water. That's it. And I got a pond as well that they can just go in. So you don't even, it's just, it was so easy. And I developed, and then for auctions, I didn't have to deal with the guy in Scranton every time. There's actually an auction here about 10 minutes from here. And it reminded me of Las Vegas, playing poker tournaments and all that, or stock market. I did a lot of that stuff to make deals and all that. I just love that whole aspect of it. And I know a lot of people, it's not for everyone because, those cows are not pets. That's just the way it is. You don't want to get emotionally attached to them. It's the way it is. I mean, it is what it is, their food. And you go out to the, local, whatever, McDonald's, that's what it is. I mean, that's just a fact of life. So I tried to kind of like the first couple of cows, I'm not going to lie, that was not easy when you had to take them in to the processor. But once you kind of understand that's just how it goes, it's turned into, like I said, passion. And they have really good life here because we have, I think, amazing property for them, a lot of grass. They're well taken care of, and we keep them for several years and they just go. That's just how it goes. And now actually we do like a 17-pound, almost 20-pound brisket, right? Giveaway for Christmas for people. I can even give you that link if people want to just.
Yes, absolutely.
On that, and we're going to do like a live drawing for it. We're going to do it on the 20th of December because we had one of the bulls. It was a huge brisket, right? And so we're doing that. Sometimes we do giveaways like this, and it just developed into passion, just like tennis. And there is not many things I know how to do, like I said, but when I do develop that passion for something, and that would be the biggest take from today's interview for you, for any of your listeners, sky is the limit what you can accomplish with your podcast or whatever when you have passion and when you want to put hard work. Because people know when you try to cut corners, and they can sense you're just doing it because you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because, they know people are not dumb. Okay. And that's where what I've noticed, a lot of people are trying to cut corners so they can make it easier for themselves and make more money and whatnot, and not really take care of people. And this is where they lose on opportunities, and they don't have a repeat business or a lot of subs for your podcast that actually keep them and getting more people on them versus like, no, this guy's just, whatever. It sounded good at the beginning, but now we're just going to cut you out, Tevin or Marco, right? So it's not easy to keep that passion all the time. So either you have it or you don't. You can't trick anyone because you're gonna put your guard down and they'll know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting that how you I think the best story, or one of the best, because you had a lot today. The cow story. That's so interesting how you just kind
I
of,
know.
all right, I'm just gonna buy all the cows. I'm like, that's just such a crazy story. And you're right. When we were talking Tuesday at the lesson, you were like, yeah, people don't believe all the things that I have to say, or all your stories and stuff, but I definitely think it's something that needs to be told, because I mean, you're well traveled and well rounded as far as from the, you said farm to table. Like I'm interested in some of that meat now, because that's the one thing that we love at eating is steak, and I love seeing your pictures online of the ribeyes and things that you cook. And I actually worked at a steakhouse for 7 years, so that's where my passion for cooking steaks and eating steaks and stuff comes from, because before that I was kind of like a eat my steak well done kind of person, and then I just got to experience all these different flavors working in that restaurant environment and in that kitchen and things like that. So
Good steak is what you're telling me.
oh,
Yes,
absolutely,
yes, you
absolutely.
know what good steak is. Yeah. Yeah, that was my biggest. I don't want to rant any longer because I know that you don't want to do this podcast forever. So I'll finish off with I just, man, when I picked up that first meat and I went in my freezer and I said, you know what, I'm going to try hamburger first, right? See what that tastes like. It was the most it was such an experience to know like this animal. I know a lot of people may get offended by all this. There's a lot of vegans out there and all that, and I get all that. But for me to know what that animal was eating and how she was taken, or whatever steer he was taking care of, and I know what they ate. And then there was something like, especially with chickens too, right? We had turkeys, chickens. I learned how to process my own chickens, believe it or not. That's another part that not many people can do. I understand that. But I just, like I said, I just developed passion for enjoying the nature and living off of that to even hunt your own food and prepare it and understand this is what it is. People just don't want to hear the facts that when you go to, let's say, Chick-fil-A, that chicken had to go through a process in order to get to your plate. And
Yeah.
I want to make sure I teach my kids all that so they understand, how it is. So again, I hope I don't offend other people out there, whatever their choice of food is and whatever. So this is how I see it, and this is what I do, and I don't change up planning that anytime soon.
No, absolutely. And then if you look just in other parts of like in nature and stuff, it's just it's the food chain, you know, naturally in nature, other animals eat other animals, so it's just, I think it's just a natural thing to do. But, obviously, we're humans and we can live our lives how we want to live our lives. So, whatever you want to do, it might be different from me, but, I'm kind of in the same boat as you. So I guess the last thing I'll ask you is, what is your favorite cut of steak?
I mean, I'm going to say the most underrated. I love tenderloin filet is my favorite.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, to me, that was an easy decision. I just love tenderloin filet. But the most underrated cut and the cheapest one out of the steaks is sirloin steak.
Yeah.
I just like I said, it's definitely something that I did not know how good sirloin actually is. He was always ribeye. Everybody's talking about ribeyes and porterhouse, of course. But I just really think my favorite is, you can put a mix between tenderloin filet and sirloin would be my underrated, by far, sirloin steak. But the grass-fed and finished and young, not old meat, it's got to be young. So it's just, there is a more to it, like under 30 months. That's kind of what I've noticed. Once you get into these older cows, it gets a lot more fat, which can taste sometimes a lot better. But man, you're eating a lot of fat, the bad fat. So I really enjoy sirloin. Sirloin would be the most underrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because Destiny's mother has a farm. So sometimes we get cows from her, and she has like a lot of horses. Like she has an equestrian therapy business where she works with kids and stuff, and they take them on rides and things like that. So that was kind of my first introduction to kind of the farm horse life. So it's been interesting to hear how you tie in being from Europe to now you're living in the country in Arkansas. And, you've had this whole city life that you experienced too. So, I mean, you pretty much lived 3 different lives in the course of your to where you are now. So it's been really interesting to hear your story. And do you have anything that you want to let the listeners know before we conclude the interview?
Yes, of course. I am the European hillbilly tennis player cowboy. That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
I'll finish off with that so people can take that how they want. But that's the mix I got here.
Absolutely. Well, Marko, I appreciate you taking the time on this Saturday to talk to us and let us know a little bit about your story. We'll put the links where you can connect Marko, and we'll put the links to where we can enter for that drawing for that brisket, because that's something I'm excited about.
December 20th. Yeah, I'll send it to you when we're done. Do I just send you on your phone like a regular?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just send it to me on my phone, and I'll put it on the show notes to where anyone that's listening can enter the drawing if they would like. So, but like I said, Marko, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you being on the show.
Oh, mine too. Pleasure is all mine. And see you later, Tevin. Say hi to everybody, to your family, and I'll see you back on the tennis court.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, this has been another episode of the Clever Angle podcast. Like I said, thanks, Marko, for being with us. And until next time.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Yep.